Hey guys, welcome to Aspect of Gaming's podcast number 10. Before we kick off with Stephen Knightley as our guest today, we're just going to run over the latest and upcoming Aspect of Gaming events for this year. So at the start of this year, we had a Smite viewing party, which was fantastic. So in other words, Smite is our new game in New Zealand, but it had a prize pool of $2.6 million for this viewing party, so we absolutely had to throw one. We held it live at the Fox Home of Sports Bar in Auckland City, with free entry and SWC digital passes for everyone who attended. We had about 50 people come in throughout the course of the event, so it was pretty good for our first Smite viewing, but we're hoping to up it with the next ones.
Coming up next is the Armageddon League of Legends tournaments that we're running alongside Armageddon. We made a little esports series with Armageddon this year when they came to us and asked them to help them out with gaming for Christchurch, Dunedin, Hamilton, and Wellington. Wellington is still a surprise to come, but for Christchurch, Dunedin, and Hamilton, we're around the place putting up online tournaments which help you qualify to get entry into each of these Armageddon events, and then you can win some pretty sick prizes with Vivienda 3D printing out some amazing League medallions and stuff. And then we got some prizing from Plantronics and Playtech, and of course Armageddon chipping in, as well as Riot Gear to give away as swag at the event. So it's going to be a big community thing, as well as a little esports going in.
Last Saturday, Aspect of Gaming threw a Hearthstone fireside gathering for people to come and have some beer and snacks while playing the game they love. There was a 16-person casual tournament, a 1v1 specialized decks challenge, and lots of prizes. It was held at the Bluestone Bar with about 40 people attending and having a great night.
And lastly on the schedule is our little baby for this year, the Dota 2 New Zealand National, a little play on the international for 2015. And that's basically our first attempt at a progressive series of online tournaments leading to a live grand final qualifier. Sorry, a live grand final. 3 online qualifiers leading to an online bracket grand final, and then a live grand final at Vector Arena, or hopefully some similar venue where we'll also watch the TI5 grand final at the end of the year. In the middle of the year rather, because that's how Dota 2 does it. If you want to check out everything that we've just talked about, all our upcoming events and everything that we've found for video game events in New Zealand in general, just head over aspectofgaming.co.nz. We've got a list of video game events we've found throughout New Zealand, communities we've found, we keep a blog up to date, and we keep you up to date with this podcast as well.
And so that's it for the Aspect of Gaming events. So let's just run some introductions now. So my name is Stephen Keaton, and I'm the one working on the podcast, and I'll be kind of heading this podcast. From the Aspect of Gaming crew, we also have Theo, the head of Aspect of Gaming.
Hey!
And we also have Han, who's quite new to the team and new to the podcast stuff as well, joining us.
Hey all.
And now, kind of the point of the whole thing, we have with us today Stephen Knightley, the director of InGame Limited, previous president of NZGDA, or the New Zealand Game Developers Association, and the coordinator of the Auckland Game Developers Meetup.
Good evening. Hey, everyone.
So, let's get into the interview, shall we?
Yeah.
So, firstly, we want to ask, how did you get into gaming?
Right.
When you were a kid, did you get into it? That kind of thing.
Yes. So one day, a very long time ago, let's kind of like assume it was like the early 80s, my dad came home with a VIC-20, a Commodore VIC-20. So it was smaller than a Commodore 64 and like smaller than Amiga. So it had 3.5K of memory. Your email signature probably has more memory than that machine did. So, that's how I first got into gaming. And it's also, I suppose, how I first got into game development and into programming, because way back then, you either had your games on a cassette tape, or there were magazines which had listings for games. So you would sit down and you would type in 2 or 3 pages worth of the game, and then save it onto your cassette tape in a series of squeaks and squawks. So, games back then kind of came hand in hand with learning a bit of programming and knowing how to put it in. And if you had done a typo on halfway down on page 1, well, you're screwed, because you wouldn't know until you got to the end of page 3.
So, Programming 101 right there.
Exactly. It's like, if you want to play Pac-Man, you have to learn to debug. So that's how I got into gaming.
That is really cool.
And then luckily, Commodore 64s, and then the Amiga. The Amiga was really my machine back in the 90s, I suppose. That's where it took off.
Yeah, so leading on from that, you said that first machine you got, did you play a specific game on that?
Oh, I played all sorts. There was a Pac-Man clone. There was a racing clone. There was a Pingu clone. But never quite the original things.
Oh, this is down talking the Omega 3.
Pardon? Sorry, say that again?
Oh, a little bit of down talking on the Omega 3. It was a copy of everything, but played brilliantly.
Oh, no, but that was on the VIC-20,
That was down on the VIC-20, yeah.
But then when the Amiga came, look, the Amiga was just fantastic and blew everything out of the water at the time. It was definitely a machine that was ahead of its time.
Oh, yeah.
And what's interesting, there were New Zealand game developers making hit Amiga games. There was this really awesome isometric racing game called Skid Marks. And you could hook up 4 joysticks to your Amiga and play it with all your mates at once. And that was published by Acid Software, who had an office in K Road. And the guys who made that are still around today. And it ended up getting ported to Sega Mega Drive and everything.
Wow.
So,
yeah, we really got in there.
Yeah, and those guys, sure, in a second I'll talk about today's game developers in New Zealand, but those guys had guts. They didn't have the internet. They were making long-distance phone calls that back when a phone call to, the UK would have cost $20 a minute, and they cut publishing deals with guys in the UK, and they really were 2 or 3 scrappy young guys in someone's back office. So that was Acid Software and their ilk. And those guys, are still hanging around the industry today.
Okay, that's good. What's your most fond gaming-related memory?
Oh, crikey, I hate this question. So look, there's so many, and they invariably date me and age me. So the first time I ever saw Doom on a PC, that really was a mind-blowing experience. But look, I hate to admit it, so my favorite game of all time is a Japanese platformer called Rainbow Islands, which sounds really twee and cutesy, and it is. And so it's actually the sequel to Bubble Bobble, which is another famous Japanese platformer from the late 80s. Anyway, in this game, it sounds really crap, so bear with me. You shoot rainbows. And you have to climb up this island before it sinks, and you play cute little boys, and the theme music is Somewhere Over the Rainbow from The Wizard of Oz.
That's fantastic.
But it's awesome game design, and it was a sequel to Bubble Bobble, which is this game with the 2 little dinosaurs who blow bubbles, not to be confused with Puzzle Bobble.
Oh, yeah.
Anyway, the great thing about Rainbow Islands is when you shoot a rainbow, it can both be a weapon to shoot a baddie, or it can be a platform to climb on, or it can be a defense against the baddies. So it was just really elegant game design. This one, move you did could have so many different choices and so many different uses. And then it just grew and grew from there. And
that's really cool.
Subtle thing about the game, and this is what got me really seriously into game development, is after playing it for a few weeks, all these kind of patterns kept emerging. It always does the same thing at this point. How come? And it turns out nothing in the game was random. Like the pickup on level 6 was determined by how many times you had jumped to the left previously. So just insane layers of depth and secrets and secret worlds and secret doors and everything. And this started life as a coin operated arcade machine.
Yeah.
It was a console game, so whoever was expected to uncover all those secrets must have had to plow hundreds of dollars of 20-cent pieces into that machine.
Yeah.
But that kind of got me into appreciating the real elegance of game design.
Yeah. You have worked in marketing and communications for some large companies such as Microsoft, IBM, Amazon, and more. Have you always wanted to end up working in the gaming sector?
Look, I think I have. So, I went off and had a corporate marketing career. But when I was in London, I was working for Microsoft's public relations team at the time, and I was working on Office and Hotmail and all these other things. But I was there at the time that we launched the Xbox, and so that was really I was lucky enough to help out with on the launch day of Xbox, and that was kind of my switch over to right, get out of the corporate stuff, time to get into gaming full time. And in particular, when I came back to New Zealand, say about 8 or 10 years ago now, that was the time when digital distribution, DLC, app stores, decent broadband meant that you now could set up a game studio in New Zealand.
Yeah, that sounds great. Did you get to do much stuff with the Xbox itself in terms of marketing for that?
Look, I helped out. I probably can't take too much credit. But we probably had one of the first Xboxes in London in our tea room, so that was pretty good.
That sounds like a dream.
It was. And also when I was there, I just blagged my way into the Game Developers Conference Europe. I just went along and as a volunteer, and got into one of the top global games conferences just while I was there.
Wow.
Just volunteering and being pushy.
Yeah, it's amazing what you can achieve just by kind of having the balls to do it, really.
Yeah. And for instance, so GDC, Global Game Developers Conference, is in San Francisco next week. And I'm really pleased. There's about 15 New Zealanders who have got over there on a scholarship, a student scholarship of some sort.
Oh, really?
And that's just fantastic that we're able to help out and make that happen this year. Because, that's how I got into it.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Once you came back to New Zealand, you started as the chairperson for the New Zealand Game Developers Association in 2011. How did this opportunity come about, and what did you kind of think of it at the time?
Yeah. So it kind of grew, and where it started was I was making games, by myself at home, and making games by yourself is pretty lonely and sucks, and it's always better to have a team around it. So I said, right, how am I going to get a team? So and there wasn't anything locally to do, so I started the Auckland Game Developer Meetups, and those meetups, the first one was probably 10 people. And then they kind of grew to 10, 15 people, and meeting in bars and cafes on weekends. And then eventually, look, they just grew. Then we moved to the Media Design School, gave us one of their rooms to use, so that they were just like a sponsor. And then we kind of grew to 30 to 60 people, and it just kept growing. So these days, the Auckland Game Meetups, there's about 120 to 150 people on the first Wednesday night of every month, and we use a lecture theatre at AUT. So, that is huge. And then last year, the Wellington meetup started up, and it didn't take them long to get to about 80 people every month.
Oh, that's wicked. In terms of... Oh, sorry, I just had a quick question about in there. Sorry. In terms of the spread of actual game developers that joined in on those and people who were just keen to learn and then grew on to game development, what was that kind of split like at the beginning?
I think it's fair to say at the start, that started, 8 or 10 years ago, it was pretty much all hobbyists and indies who wanted to get in. Because I don't think at that point, there really were only, say, 2 or 3 game studios in Auckland.
Oh, yeah.
And back in those days, really, the only significant game studio in New Zealand was She, now known as Pickpock, down in Wellington.
Oh, yeah.
And so, but the great thing now is, there's at least 500, maybe 600 full-time professional game developers in New Zealand, plus several hundred, hobbyists, I'd say.
Yeah, it's grown incredibly.
Yeah, and grown incredibly fast as well. So effectively what happened is the meetups just got bigger and bigger. The New Zealand Game Developers Association had already existed since about 2001. And that was really spearheaded by Mario Winans, who's the MD at She, or Pickpock. But it's fair to say they were having a bit of a quiet time, and we said to them, hey, let's join forces, let's reinvigorate the association, and off it went. And it was at the right time because it coincided with that period of growth in the New Zealand industry.
Yeah. I'm just going to play a short show reel from NZGDA before we move on with our questions. So here you go, people. Yeah, it's quite a showreel there, really.
And it's just the tip of the iceberg too.
It's got quite a variety of things on it. You've got games. It looks like I'm pretty sure I saw the game with the little star from that InGame has developed for. Was it people that had trouble with facial recognitions and expression recognition, all the way to Path of Exile, which looks like a top tier, high budget game.
Yeah. Yeah, no, there is huge diversity in the games being made in New Zealand. And you're right, there's serious games and health games, and that's what my company InGame does, amongst other things. Look, the majority of stuff, it's fair to say, probably is mobile, smartphone, and app development games, but very much kind of like the equivalent of AAA mobile. I'm sure your kind of members are more interested in, Path of Exile, an action RPG that did a better job of being Diablo 3 than Diablo 3 did. That's obviously one we're really proud of.
Yeah.
And there's also lots of weird little original indie guys out there doing crazy stuff too.
So what does NZGDA actually aim to achieve in New Zealand? What's its purpose?
So our purpose is to grow and represent game development in New Zealand. A, because games are awesome, and B, because creating them is awesome and the creative outlet is awesome, and C, because there's an economic benefit to New Zealand. And what New Zealand needs, if we want it to be a great place to live for future generations, is a whole bunch of high-tech, digital, weightless exports. So we can sell apps, not just milk powder.
Yeah.
And so, what do we do to do that? Is, we help everyone, we help connect people and get people together. So that's what the meetups do. Once a year, we have an annual conference, which just sells out in no time flat. So that'll be in September again this year at AUT University, and we had about 350 people. Last year, our keynote speaker was Dave Breivik, who's the creator of Diablo and former boss of Blizzard North. So we get some pretty impressive people coming along to that.
Yeah, I think I came along to it last year, or it might have been the year before. You had a mocap studio there in AUT as well. It was fantastic.
Yeah, and that's just part of the AUT facility, but some of the game studios are getting to use that as well.
Yeah, that's really cool.
And what else do we do? So next week, a whole bunch of Kiwi game studios are in San Francisco for the for the Game Developers Conference. So we're coordinating that. We ran a scholarship program to help get some people free tickets to GDC. At our conference last year, we also managed to run a startup competition. So we managed to come up with $10,000 cash and about $20,000 worth of software and support for, unfortunately, one Kiwi game studio. And that was kind of called the Kiwi Game Starter. Because unfortunately, there's any government grants or any business funding grants if you wanted to start off as a game developer in New Zealand. So we managed to cobble together enough sponsorship to get the first one of those off the ground.
Well, hopefully we'll see some more.
Yeah, and then sometimes, look, we just try to get the game studios together to collaborate, work with each other, and occasionally harangue the government to say, oh, you have a film industry, would you like a game industry to be just as big?
Yeah, I see no reason why it shouldn't be either.
We don't help attract tourists.
That's true.
That's our only downside.
Yeah, I guess you could. It would be difficult to do, but a lot of the attraction from the films and stuff is, there is the actual how they built the Hobbit set and things with that, and just the landscape itself. But if you built games to also convey a lot more about the actual New Zealand environment and lifestyle and things, you could potentially do the same thing. But
NZ Sim 2015.
yeah,
Exactly.
Auckland Council Sim.
Actually, funny enough, so at InGame, because we make serious games, yes, I've had several, town planners, city planners, come and talk about serious games, being interested in that. And it's fair to say, yeah, they all play SimCity in their spare time.
Yeah.
Funny enough,
Good old truck from
city planner.
Yeah, I'm surprised nobody's actually put up Sheep Simulator for some kind of regard. Goat Simulator's fantastic, I have to say.
There's a few sheepdog apps out there.
Oh yeah.
store.
So moving on from that, how is the New Zealand game industry doing at the moment? So you've just talked about trying to actually make it an industry within, with government approval and all of that kind of stuff. But I mean, it is an industry in itself. It's just not recognized by the government and things. But how are we doing?
Yep. Oh, and look, it's recognised by the government. It's just they've got other problems to solve and other priorities. So look, it's doing really well, and it's done really well just by itself. So these stats are now a year old. So in the financial year, a year or so ago, New Zealand game studios earned about 80 million worth of exports, and there's about 450 full-time game developer jobs. And that figure has like doubled, or the revenue's doubled every year for the last 3 years. So like it was 40 million before that and 20 million before that.
That's
So,
outstanding.
so by now, we're conservatively at least $100 million export earner. That is way in excess of New Zealand music and way in excess of New Zealand locally produced film. And those stats are hard to come up with, hard to find. So yeah, that's like in 3 or 4 years.
That's good growth. That's quite amazing, actually.
Yeah. Well, I reckon it should be bigger. Because so people say, "Oh, wow, you seem to be doing really well," but we only doubled. We only doubled during a period where there's been mass disruption in digital distribution of gaming, and we only doubled.
That is true.
I
And
mean,
the games industry as a whole is growing very fast at the moment as well.
yeah. Although I mean, sure, this is a whole industry average. So within that, there's certainly some individual companies who have done much faster. But like the mobile gaming segment's been growing about 30 or 40% on average every year for the last few years. So we have done pretty well.
So a lot of this, and a lot of our potential with games obviously comes through exporting our games to the rest of the world because we just don't have the player base here, the population numbers to really turn a large profit and support all these companies.
Yeah.
What would you say in terms of trying to compete globally with all the other games being produced and export games of high quality and that will do well? What is kind of the greatest advantage and the biggest hindrance we have
Yeah.
producing games from New Zealand?
Yeah. So look, New Zealand, we are good at making creative games and like well polished games. We have good artists and we have good like designers. We have programmers who understand how to include good design and things. So we generally make good looking games. And it's not hard for a game studio to hire someone who used to work at Web Digital. You know? So we had that from day one. Plus we always were pretty good technically. So as soon as the barrier to entry of, previously, if you wanted to publish a game, you had to jump on an aeroplane and somehow cut a deal with either Sony, Nintendo, or Microsoft.
Yeah.
As soon as that was no longer the case, we leapt in. And the cool thing is, there was probably a bunch of Kiwi studios trying already. And as soon as digital distribution came along, we got in early. So there's some Kiwis who had like hit iPhone games back when you could charge $8 or $10 for an iPhone game.
Wow.
Before freemium even existed. So, there's Magic Jungle was a developer in the Hawke's Bay, and they had a hit game called Chopper, and then Chopper 2, and now the Blockheads. So, but, Chopper 1 retailed for $8 on iPhone at the time. And why that's important is those guys got in during the gold rush, during the land grab. So people like Pickpock or Ninja Kiwi, they can now just promote their next hit game to everyone who loved their last hit game. So the audience that they've built up over the last 5 or 6 years, that's their asset.
Yeah, that's a really big thing to kind of get in at the start when there aren't too many things there and build that player base.
Yeah. Look, because when I compare it to Australia, at that time they still had lots of medium tier console studios, and that market went backwards. So Australia took a few years to regroup and to get their head around digital and app development. So no, New Zealand was in a good place. The hard part is still, you're a long way away from the centres of the industry like San Francisco or Tokyo or wherever, and that can just help make it hard getting a publishing deal. In some places, there are just publishers with more money than sense. So one of the things the New Zealand Game Developers Association likes to do every now and then is connect New Zealand developers with publishers who have more money than sense.
That sounds like a great idea.
Yeah. In the short term, you don't always want those publishers in the long term.
Yeah, that's a good point. If they don't have that much sense, don't keep them around, but let them get you off your feet.
Yep.
Just to clarify there, you used the word freemium at some point. You just want to explain to our viewers what that means.
So, I mean, freemium, I mean free to play, or certainly free to download, and then supported by a mix of advertising and in-app purchases. And look, certainly if you're doing mobile app development, that has quickly become the predominant business model. And there's not many, I think most of the New Zealand studios do free to play good and do it well. And the example that people always talk about glowingly to me is Path of Exile, which is a PC game which is free to play.
Yeah.
And from day one, those guys were really adamant. There is no pay to win in this.
Oh yeah,
it's all cosmetic stuff.
Yeah,
was Path of Exile was a crowdfunded thing, wasn't it? If I believe I'm correct.
So what was good is it was a genuinely crowdfunded thing. So they launched, so that they did their private beta, and they opened up for I think it was Easter. Oh, crikey, 2 or 3 years ago, and they opened up for Easter only and said, right, that's our private beta. What did you think? And just naturally, the community after that said, this is awesome. We want to keep playing. We would give you money to keep playing in your private beta. So, and this is why it was a successful crowdfunding campaign. They already had a crowd. They'd already built that community of people who wanted to play that game. And at that time, were worried as hell that Diablo 3 was going in the wrong direction.
Yeah.
And just luckily, Path of Exile guys decided to go one direction, and it was different than the direction that Diablo 3 decided to go. But imagine their faces when Chris and Jonathan and Eric at Grinding Gear heard that, oh fuck, Diablo 3 is coming out.
Yeah.
We're gonna get squashed. We're dead.
Exactly. Making such a similar game, and suddenly the giants are like, oh, we're releasing another one. You're like, oh god.
So they had a community who liked the game and believed strongly in the game going in that dark and gritty direction. So I can't remember what their total was. Did they raise like $1.5 million?
Oh, I'm not sure what it was, but they've done exceptionally well.
Yeah. So that is the single biggest crowdfunding success in New Zealand, I think. So yeah, like, when I mentioned that to film people or musicians trying to do a crowdfunding, they're like, $10,000 would be nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Although talking to other game developers locally who have done a crowdfunding, about 15 to 20,000 is pretty good for crowdfunding a game. The winner of our Kiwi Game Starter Award last year is a random generated horror game called Phantasmal, and they raised about 15,000 in their Kickstarter last year, and that's after being profiled by PewDiePie.
Oh yeah.
So you would have thought, so they had pretty good publicity for their Kickstarter.
Yeah. Last year, no, not last year, 2013, in a New Zealand Business Review article, they stated the fact that a lot of game development studios in New Zealand were citing a shortage of appropriately skilled programmers and not enough personnel as a reason that they were not growing. Now, I personally know a couple of people who have gone through computer science degrees at Auckland University and would love to get into gaming and have looked into it. And it's quite hard to find a job because everyone would like experienced programmers. And so when you come fresh out of school, even if you have stuff you've been working on by yourself, they've found it very difficult to get anything. Now, do you think that there are enough people out there, like my friends and stuff like that, and it's just that it may require the businesses and things to understand that to get more people in, they do have to put in the time to train them and, to expect that?
Yeah, there's a bit of that. I mean, what the shortage is for experienced programmers.
Yeah.
And so what does that mean? I mean, it means, have you published at least one video game? And so it's fair to say when you're setting up a large team, setting up a studio, look, we effectively hired every New Zealander who had experience in making games. And often we will now import from overseas great talented people. So, for instance, Gameloft, Auckland, is now the biggest game studio in New Zealand, and it's part of Gameloft, which is a big French multinational, has about 6,000 game developers around the world. They quite regularly import senior people to be their team leads, but they are indeed, training up graduates and have graduate development programs. So my criteria is, have you published one game? There is no reason why you should not have published one game. So it can be a problem if you're, say, doing a pure computer science degree, for instance, or engineering. You've got to make sure that for your final year project or something, you ask your tutor or your team, hey, can we do this as a game? So I've got a game on my portfolio.
Yeah.
There's no reason why you can't get an Apple developer account or a Google Play developer account and just make a game and publish it. Because it's just the experience that we're looking for ain't just, do you know computer science? Do you understand C# and object-oriented programming? It's also, can you complete the process of making a game? Because it's long, complicated, frustrating, and soul-destroying. I want to know if you've actually got the passion to see it through and not just say and think that you can see it through. So I don't care if your published game is a Super Mario Brothers clone, as long as you made it yourself.
Yeah.
So, and so that's the thing. I hear that from people. I'm a qualified graduate, but part of that qualification is, have you made a game?
That's very interesting.
How all the systems come together? Do you have a sense of gameplay? Do you have a sense of art, even if you're going to be a programmer?
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's really fantastic advice there. It really resonates with the fact that programmers, despite it being a very mathematical and sort of very, very rigid science in and of itself, it's still an art. And it's like when you go out as an artist, you need a portfolio as well, just to demonstrate your skills, your work, and how you function as well. And it's especially good for game design because there's different levels to it that you don't think about unless you've actually tried to make it. And is that one of the bigger parts of actually having made a game that you look at in people that they understand each level of creating a game?
Yeah, because it's all about a team of people coming together. So the programmer has to understand the tools and the pain the artist is going through. Otherwise, that programmer won't be able to integrate the art into the program.
Yeah, yeah.
It's a real team activity. And also, in addition to the art side of it, it's just the project management side of it. If I say, I need you to make an inventory system, you need to be able to turn around and say, okay, I estimate that will take 48 hours for us to do. And I go, good, stick to it. You've got no more than 48 hours to do it.
Whew. Tough when you hear it like that.
Yeah. Otherwise, we all go bankrupt and there's no jobs for anyone.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, no.
Do you think this is something that a lot of people kind of going into computer science that are looking to be game developers and are very interested in that don't quite realize is the difference between just learning how to program and learning a language and actually learning game development?
Yeah, it's that, and it's becoming familiar with game development. Games are just so damn complicated. There's so many specialist little parts. So like, I was programming and doing game development for 10 years before, just as a hobby before I got into it professionally.
Yeah.
And I think, my God, if I hadn't had that experience, I don't know how anyone would catch up. Like, you can just look at a game and just go like, the particle system, which is making sparks and smoke and, power-up effects. You could spend a month learning how particle systems work and mastering it and understanding it and just tweaking things. And it's not just that it's necessarily complicated, it's just it takes time. Networking code, you could spend 6 months just learning how to get multiplayer working properly on crappy New Zealand internet. So it just takes time. There's a craft element of it.
What would you say to young people who are aspiring to enter the gaming industry?
Yeah, so just make a game. So the great thing is there's lots of entry-level tools, and I would happily hire someone who came in and said, here's this game I've made using Game Maker, which is, drag and drop game making tool, or or Construct 2.
RPG Maker.
Absolutely. There have been some successful games made with those tools. I think Hotline Miami, was made with GameMaker, so that counts.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
what probably doesn't count. We laugh at this a little bit. Is Minecraft is not quite a programming language, but start and then move up to GameMaker.
Yeah.
It's a good start, though.
Yeah, it is. It's fantastic. But no, we laugh because we get parents sometimes to say, "Oh, little Timmy, little Sophie wants to be a game developer. She's so excellent at Minecraft."
No.
You're like, "Yes, good." It's like she could be the next Peter Jackson because she's very good at watching TV.
Yeah, yeah. Although once you get in a redstone circuit, depending on how crazy you get, but yeah.
Yeah, but you've probably already got some higher sophisticated knowledge already when that happens.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's
You've probably learned programming somewhere else and then come back.
If someone came to you and they said, I used a redstone circuit in Minecraft to build a computer and then programmed a game on that computer, here, you can play it.
Oh, that's the next level up.
It is.
So, in terms of creating a game, as you've said, especially for people who aren't used to it, it's a very, very tough thing to do. And in terms of people wanting to create a game for themselves and publish something so that they can then go into the industry, what are some resources out there that they can use to get help with this and to get kind of support to help them push through and actually complete what they're doing?
Yeah. So each of those game making tools generally have pretty good online communities. There's other good online communities like IndieDB or TigSource, which are good indie game development ones. But look, ultimately, this is why we created the Game Developer Meetups. That's where you come along once a month and you actually meet people who are going through the same pain as you, and ideally collaborate. And actually, game developers are pretty poor at collaborating because everyone walks in the door going, "I'm going to make my game."
Yeah.
For my game. So yes, you need to get over yourself and just join the team with that other person who wants to make their game.
And yeah, you really have to do because, as you said, game development is a team process,
Yeah.
and you got to start it somewhere.
One of the other awesome events that happens is the Global Game Jam, and it happens every year all around the world. So I think 9,000 people did it this year, and it's the last weekend of January, and it's like it's like the 48 hours of filmmaking. So it's 40 hours to make a game, and you just rock on up to the Media Design School or Waikato Uni or Massey School of Design, and you rock up, you get given a theme, and 48 hours later, there's some crazy excuse for a game has been made.
Oh God, that's scary. I just remember my Comp Sci 101 kind of projects and that taking me weeks and weeks. I can't imagine a 48-hour kind of screwing for that. No. Oh.
Yeah. And again, just the fact that you actually completed a game is an achievement.
Yeah. A quick question, just to interrupt all the other questions here. Is there, something I thought I might add in is, have you heard before about Hacktivate?
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, because they've started implementing more gaming things into what they're doing, and make that it's kind of a way to bridge the coding excitement of it all and the viewing excitement and people being able to get more into the viewing side and coming to the event and enjoying it. Is that something that you guys look at quite a lot as well, like Hacktivate, or you focus more on the gaming kind of things?
Oh, we stick to the gaming things, but look, we've promoted Hacktivate to our communities in the past, and I know there's a bit of crossover.
Yeah, they're going global. I know one of the guys that started it. It's I met him in the Biz Dojo at school. I just thought I might mention it. Yeah, no, that's awesome.
Cool. So that kind of says a lot about what young people can do to help their chances at getting into the game industry and achieving, their dreams and things. But moving on from that and kind of talking about you and another one of your projects actually is you're the director of InGame Limited. Could you tell us a little bit about what InGame does and why you decided to start it?
Yeah, so we're the corporate sellouts of game development. So because when I set up a game studio in New Zealand, there weren't too many people who want publishers or people who just wanted to give me money to make games. And because I had a bit of a corporate background in marketing and the like, my first clients, were corporates. So, but it's actually quite diverse, the kind of stuff we get to make. So sometimes we make advertising games. So, for instance, we made an Angry Birds style game for Dairy, New Zealand called Gumboot Glory. We throw gumboots at possums.
Oh, yes.
And you mentioned earlier before, like, what would Sim New Zealand be, or Sheep Simulator? That's my contribution to, there's no New Zealand culture games out there. Well, now there is. You get to throw gumboots at possums. So that's an advertising game. But also we do corporate training games. So I'm doing a fire simulator for the New Zealand Fire Service, which is like training fire people correct procedures.
Oh, that's awesome.
We're doing a health and safety game, which sounds as boring as anything, because that's how people treat health and safety. But when you look at it, hey, it's about falling over, breaking legs, maiming people. We're trying to, well, we'll see. We're making a very simple game, but we're saying, right, you better craft different ways to get rid of these hazards. So at one level, put up a road cone to say, watch out, all the way through to actually using some tools to fix the hazard.
Oh, that's quite cool.
So that, that's something we can sell to corporates, and they can include in their corporate training. And then we've also done some educational games. And so we did a game with Auckland University last year with the computer science department and the faculty of education. And it wasn't teaching kids how to read. It was what we call critical literacy. So it was all about, there's a scenario, and it is an asteroid's going to smash into your planet. What are you going to do about it? And you go talk to all these different people with different viewpoints, and you have to say, right, what's credible or not? Who do I believe or not? So, and it was kind of getting at trying to teach young kids what to trust online.
Oh, yeah.
And so the great thing about that is, with the university behind it, they did a big research study. We trialed it in some schools, and it works. And we also did a little fire safety educational game for the fire service as well. And again, we tested it with some psychologists, and it works. So the thing I'm really proud about in the last year or so is we've now got evidence that educational games work, and they work in New Zealand. So I'm really proud of that and pleased of that. And, all of us gamers who need to justify the hours and hours we spend on our habit,
Yeah.
There's now some university research to back it up.
That's fantastic. You've already answered this a tiny bit in answering this question here, but how has your previous experience in marketing and communications actually helped you when you moved to the gaming sector, and especially in creating in-game?
Yeah, look, it's the same job. So it's really good. Like if you're in marketing and communications, it's all about, right, what's this message that we want to get to a particular target audience? And you can either do it with a TV ad or an ad of some sort. But really, we're just translating that and thinking, right, how can you do that digitally? And the thing that really gets me excited as a game developer is, how can you get a meaning across through the rules of a system without, say, using any words?
Yeah.
So that, and this is the experience all of us as game players have got. All those people who come up to me and say, I learned history by playing Civilization, or I learned World War II by playing Command and Conquer. I go, oh, that one might not be quite so accurate.
But it would be nice if they could do that via a game.
And so, for example, the little fire safety game we did with the fire service, it's called Fire Trap, and it's a first-person endless runner. So a bit like Temple Run, except you're escaping a burning house.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
And the key thing to do if you're in a burning house is get out and don't pick anything up.
Yep.
That's what you get taught. So we filled the level with shiny gold coins.
Oh,
But
that's
if
clever.
you pick them up, you lose your acceleration, you stop, and you get a time penalty.
Oh,
And so
wow. That's
just within
that's
2 minutes, within 2 minutes of watching the kids play the game, they were saying to each other, "Oh, don't stop and pick anything up."
Yeah, don't get the coins. Yeah.
It's actually amazing how fast people can learn from an interactive experience like the game medium.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just the incentives or the behavioural economics of it teach that lesson, and far more memorably and far more powerfully than a brochure or even a message saying don't pick anything up.
You know what? I'm looking forward to helping my kids with their homework in the future. I think that's going to be a lot of fun. And I'm looking forward to seeing a lot of this implementing in schools in the next couple of years. It's really exciting stuff.
Yeah.
What would you say kind of your biggest success with in-game has been so far?
Oh, it's probably been some of those projects I just mentioned and having that evidence behind them. A funny one we've got on at the moment, and it was kind of done on a cheap budget and tightly. We just did the app for Our First Home, which is TVNZ's current home renovation reality TV show.
Oh yes, I think I've seen that.
So look, it's probably the kind of game your mum or your grandma would play. It's
Yeah,
a
yeah.
home decoration game. It's like The Sims without The Sims. Like it's the home decoration part.
Oh yeah.
But actually, the people who've been playing that have been playing it for about 40 minutes a week. So like, there's 3 nights of this reality TV show, and then they're like watching one whole extra episode, which is this app.
Yeah.
So the concept of second screening of people being active on their smartphone or their tablet while they're watching the show is really alive and well in New Zealand. So just from a marketing point of view, that's just been a really successful and interesting case study.
Awesome. In designing a game to kind of teach and do good, to maybe teach skills or morals or facts that people should learn, like you were talking about the fire, to get down, get out, and don't pick anything up. What kind of processes do you go through in development to make sure it not only achieves its intended purpose of getting across the information or making people learn these skills, but it also remains fun to play?
Yeah. And that is challenging. So the first thing is, you get really clear on what are the 3 things you want to teach. Yeah, because otherwise, with scope creep. Yeah, it's like, oh yes, we could teach that and teach that and teach that. It's like,
Yeah.
yeah, okay. Have you got twice as much money? And they're making it and fun to play. Look, it can be hard, but I suppose that the place I come from is I keep remember playing all these fun games and swearing that I'm learning something. So they should be able to be the same thing.
Yeah.
So I think generally we just try to find an appropriate genre of game and take it from there. And there's so yeah, we just believe that learning is the same thing as fun. So there's a famous game design book by a game designer called Ralph Costa, and he was famous for working on a whole bunch of the early MMOs, um, like what's like the Ultima series, and he
Yeah.
did Star Wars Online and a whole bunch of things. And he wrote a book called A Theory of Fun, and it's kind of like it's the textbook for game design 101.
Yeah.
And his whole point is that a game is interesting and holds your attention as long as you're being challenged and you're still learning something.
Yes.
So as soon as you master it, that's when you get bored of it.
Yeah. I have noticed that with a lot of newer games nowadays seem to be getting easier and easier, and in some ways they're keeping it just hard enough to remain fun, but they're making it easier, obviously, to be more accessible to a larger audience. But to someone who does game a lot, it does seem as if they
Yeah.
are taking some of the fun out of the games by taking the challenge out of them.
Yep. Yep. So when he did his updated edition, just like the last year, of course, with the rise of all the casual games, casual smartphone games,
Yeah.
he's kind of had to add that in. That once upon a time challenge was what you made games around.
Yeah.
Days grinding while you're a soccer mum waiting to pick your kids up from school in the car,
Yeah.
sitting outside the school gate, is a market as well.
Yeah, something because it's so accessible on a smartphone, then just something to pass the time and be entertaining is kind of enough.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. But that's fine. That just means there's different markets for games.
Yeah, and you learn those as well as you go around purchasing games. Obviously, when you look into a game, if it's going to be something to pass the time, or if it's going to be something that's going to really challenge you and draw you into the story and things.
Yeah.
Going into game developing, and you've actually been doing this for quite a long time. Before you started in game and stuff, as you were saying, you were a hobbyist. But before that, you did play games yourself. Now, from being just someone who played games, like I'm sure a lot of the people here are, to actually developing, you've talked about the hardships of developing, and what kind of surprised you most about how different it was to your preconceptions about it?
Yeah, It's just that it takes a long time. It's just all the little things. And you can tell what makes a good game is when it is polished and loved. But we had a game recently where I'm sure I spent 2 weeks just updating a spreadsheet, tweaking it there, or there's a typo on the 5th inventory screen, or we've got to tweak the corners on that user interface. Just that polishing and refining. So it's not necessarily programming that you're doing. It's just tweaking and refining, and that stuff just takes time. It's like change that color on that gun and then re-import it back into the game engine. It might take an hour. So there does just become a series of grunt work. It just takes longer than people think.
Yeah, it kind of gets to that point where it sounds like you've made your game and you're like, yes, this is kind of what we want. And then you want to sit back and be like, okay, everybody else come in and do all these menial jobs while I tell you what to do.
Yeah. And that's why indie game development is so great, because you don't have to worry about all the rough. You can just get the core game out there and just publish it rough as guts.
Yeah.
You've got nothing to hold yourself to account to. No one cares. It's like, yeah, that core game was awesome.
Yeah, you actually linked me to a video that there was an interview. Well, not an interview. It was a talk by a guy talking about kind of game feel and how it's so important in games. And I think that's something that a lot of indie games get, is they often, because of budget and because of how hard it is to do things as a small studio or potentially even one person, they don't have particularly good graphics. They don't have very in-depth storylines, etc. But a lot of them have a very good game feel to them that makes them incredibly fun to play, even if there's not a lot to them.
Yeah. Yep. No, I agree with that. And often being one person helps with that too.
Yeah.
That's faster than having to discuss things with a team. And often that's a great case of where the constraints help with the creativity. Yeah. And that's why in the indie gaming scene, retro pixel art or 8-bit art is so popular, because you can still got an interesting aesthetic, but you can still tune it out quickly.
Yeah, exactly.
And that also really helps. The problem that other starting game developers have is they go, "Oh, this is easy. I'm going to make World of Warcraft."
Yeah.
No, start with Pong.
Yeah.
Get ambitious. Go to Arkanoid or Breakout. Then work your way up to Shatter within that genre.
So a lot of obviously in-gamers is trying on the whole to kind of develop games to teach people things and teach skills, morals, facts, as I've said before. You do also do other things in terms of small games for advertisers, etc. But do you think any of the big mainstream games coming out nowadays still teach valuable lessons and skills to their players?
Yeah, look, I think they certainly teach skills, even if that skill is how to cover and reload and stuff. You're certainly learning a skill. The question is that transferable to the real world?
Yeah.
So that's the thing. Well, there's design a game where the thing you have to do to win is the skill you need in the real world. And if I get a bit philosophical here, like games can teach values and worldviews and philosophy. So like Civilization. Oh no. So SimCity, for instance, is a communist game. Ultimately, it's about central planning. And it's still reasonably effective strategy to win the game to increase taxes. And you can just build those in anyone's house. So SimCity is communist. Civilization, on the other hand, is the video game of the American 20th century, where technological progress was what mattered above all else in society. So you can argue that those games are teaching not just skills, but they're teaching values.
Yeah.
And there's a Christian video games studio in Auckland who are actually making a decent game, which shocks all the Christians as much as it shocks the gamers.
Hey.
And they're in a beta at the moment, and that's the kind of philosophy they're going for. And you teach Bible values and stories and through a game.
Cool.
And so, but what's all that's required in that case is for a teacher to walk into a classroom and say, write an essay comparing Civilization to SimCity and what this means for 20th century geopolitics. So just as a teacher, and that kind of fits in with a lot of the project-based learning and bring your own device stuff that's happening in schools at the moment. It's, the teacher says, hey kids, go and do this on your iPad. And now I'm going to be your facilitator. What does this mean in the real world?
Yeah.
And I know some teachers that have indeed use several like commercial games even just to teach social studies.
Oh, really?
And so in the quite a few like NGOs and charity groups around the world have made games. There's the United Nations has made several. There's some really good civics ones. My mate who used it in a social studies class played Sid Meier's Pirates, which I think's just been remade recently or remastered by iPads and stuff. So you play a pirate or a buccaneer sailing around the Caribbean, but it's actually a small business trading simulator.
Yeah.
So and did an economics unit around it.
I don't know if you've heard of Anno as well. That's very similar.
Yeah. Looking at a whole bunch of the war games out there. There's a class of actually accurate war games out there.
Yeah. I actually remember my classics teacher talking a lot about Rome Total War, and he used to play that a lot.
Yep.
So it's amazing how much you do get games creeping into and overlapping with a lot of areas of study and things that you kind of don't notice unless you kind of happen to play that particular game or work in the sector.
Yeah, the Total War series is really good at that. They come up with random tips that doesn't change the game at all, but it still tells you that something's happened in some part of the world, and it is quite fascinating. And it integrates with gameplay, so you're actually reading it going, does it matter? And you figure it out. Yeah.
Yeah. And look, I must admit, it's still pretty easy to make dull educational games. Sometimes the job just requires you, look, here's a paragraph about that piece of history.
Yeah.
But that piece of homework still gets done more often than the other piece of homework.
Yeah. Just being able to play a game around it and have it kind of spaced out with things that you consider fun.
Yeah. Although my philosophy is the kids shouldn't just be playing the game because it's this cool, sexy, fun thing, but that ideally the game itself, the interactive and the system, teaches it better than a textbook could have.
Yeah, that's a good point. In terms of InGame Limited, and teaching things to kids and stuff like that, especially with let's use the fireman one for instance, with getting out of the house. This kind of game, I feel like we learn things better when we do them. Someone can tell you something, in my maths lecture, the lecturer can tell me, this is how you solve this kind of problem. And then I'll go to do one of those problems and I'll have no idea what to do until I've done 100 of them before. And so we learn a lot better by doing than by being told.
Yep.
And in the same vein as that means kind of the more immersed you can be in a game, I feel the more quickly you will catch on to these concepts. So do you have any plans of kind of utilizing things like the Oculus Rift and virtual reality and things to bring people more into their games and to immerse them further?
Yeah. We did an Oculus Rift project last year for Kiwi Rail and National Rail Safety Week, and their theme for this campaign that year was like, do you imagine what it's like if you're being the train driver and you have a collision with a car at a level crossing?
Oh yeah.
And so no, it was a put on the Oculus Rift and you are the driver of a train and you drive along a little track of scenic railway and then there's a car crash and cut to black, but like one of those car crash road transport ads on TV.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That could be quite terrifying.
That worked. You would see people sitting in the seat and we'd be sitting there timing it, right? Yep, they're 20 seconds in, and then you see them shudder.
Oh, yeah.
That's the moment where they had their car crash. So, and that was done just using the Oculus Development Kit 1, so that the graphics weren't great because the resolution was quite low for that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was really effective. And so it was a short, sharp novelty. But certainly the spatial awareness stuff, when we were talking to people for a few about simulators, being able to put an Oculus Rift and go somewhere that you couldn't normally and be able to rehearse there is really valuable. So in some heavy industry, we've looked at doing that, for instance.
Yeah. That's great. So, what are the kind of the future plans for InGame? Are you continuing along the same track and looking to kind of expand and keep doing these games and finding out more about how they actually affect people and how you can better do it?
Yeah, I think so. We're just planning to keep on going and doing it better and get more sophisticated. And it's interesting. We've certainly got a pipeline of interest from all sorts of both corporates and government agencies and stuff who are really just seeing that games is a big popular medium and it's a smart medium. So no, we're just looking forward to doing it bigger and better.
Awesome. Well, I'm afraid that's all we actually have time for today on the podcast. So thank you so much for coming on, Stephen.
Yeah. Hey, my only closing comments would be if people want to find a meetup, just go to meetup.com and search. And if you just want to follow the gaming industry in New Zealand, we have the Facebook page, which is just facebook.com/NZGDA.
Yeah. So be sure to
Awesome.
go and check out the APOG websites. We have, the main website where we have all the gaming events upcoming in New Zealand, a blog about New Zealand culture and what's going on. You can also follow us on Facebook and Twitter where we have all our events. Make sure to check out Stephen Knightley and what he does at nzgda.com, ingame.co.nz, and Pursuit PR, which he's also a part of. The links are all up on the podcast at the moment, but I'm afraid, yeah, that's all we have time for. So thanks again, Stephen.
You're welcome. Thanks, guys.
And we're going to wrap
Thanks.
that up.